Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So I was iffy if I wanted to do a part two, but I did have enough requests to kind of finish off basically what I started with kind of my reaction to the live stream regarding Chris from Card Ladder and Kristina from Card Ladder and the whole content thing. Obviously we had the original video and has been very well received, some very thoughtful and great comments, and I do appreciate those of you who decided to chime in and join in. I'm hoping the latter portion should be a lot quicker than the first one because we're going to be recovering a lot of the same ground, so I really don't want to repeat myself too much. The other piece is also I'm not going to give the same initial context. So if you're curious about kind of where I'm coming from on that, that was all included at the beginning of the first video. I don't want to repeat myself and go over the same old ground and make this video longer than it needs to be. I did want to finish off though what I started because we only covered really the first half of the live stream. So we're going to get straight into the second half of the live stream right away. We're going to start with it. If you're not familiar with what it is, it's basically a 1 hour live stream that Dakota from Sports Card Anonymous did with Chris and Kristina from Card Ladder, discussing the whole idea of what is good content. And this all stemmed from basically a series of social media posts on Instagram where Chris from Card Ladder decided to take, kind of shots at what he deemed to be clown content, content that drove away kind of the more serious, money-minded, and obviously that got a very strong reaction, and we did talk about that on the live stream this past Friday. I doubt we'll have more to add on this upcoming Friday, but if we do, we do. But for the most part, I think a lot of the general ideas got out. More than anything else, this is just to put a bow on this and to finish off and take a look and see if there's anything else that they say that I feel is worthy of some hashtag scholarship correction. Let's put it that way. So let's get right into it. I'm going to do the share screen thing, and then I'm going to utilize some editing magic. I'm going to cut to different segments of it. I'll play a little bit for you, and then I'll respond to whatever needs response, and then I'll move on to the next one. We'll go from cut to cut, and I think that's going to be the best way to get us from point A to point B and get this thing done for this evening. I am recording this one actually pretty late, so hopefully I'll be able to go through it. So instead of my customary beer, I've got my cold brew, which I may regret in the morning since I am recording it late. But here we go. I'm going to expand this to full size, and we're going to listen in right from about the midway point of the live stream and we'll take it to the end.
He says, how is a badge of approval not telling people what to watch?
I mean, I will not speak for Kristina on this because I think Kristina feels differently than me about this. But I don't really believe in telling people this one's bad, this one's bad, that one's bad, because I don't believe that I can make a determination. This content creator is bad. This content creator is bad. I think that content creators have the ability to make all different types of content, and they respond to all different types of incentives. And so maybe if there's a voice out there in the wilderness like myself who's providing an incentive to content creators to make content that's going to appeal to the me's of the world, the people of the world who need a little bit more sober, rational discourse, who need to look at numbers, who need to see historical trends, who need things to be couched in serious or semi-serious ways. For the people like me out there, we want some content that represents our point of view and our interests. And so I'm trying to create an incentive structure that says, hey, look, that guy, that unbearable Chris Hoge with the worst takes, he will actually enjoy this. And so I know that there's at least one nerd in the hobby who will like if I put this out. And maybe there's more than me, just me out there, if I start speaking loudly about it. And I'll tell you what, I think there's a lot of people who feel the way I do based on the feedback I've gotten.
Okay, sounds fair enough, but this was not the tone of the original set of social media posts. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier, and again, I'm not going to regurgitate the same old ground. I want to make these speaking pieces a little bit shorter here. The bottom line is that this is kind of a complete 180 on the whole original idea. Calling content clown content, basically implying that it is unworthy or it is beneath the serious, the Michael Saylors of the world and those examples that we gave completely undermines this message that we're getting here now in the second half of this live stream. And this is kind of this weird, in or out, make up your mind kind of situation. Effectively, he's advocating for a very niche audience, and he kind of semi-acknowledges that it's kind of a niche audience because he goes, the me's of the world, but then he kind of then emphasizes by saying, I think there's a number of us based on the feedback I've gotten. Well, that's great, but again, I'm back to, people giving their own personal stories. If you're kind of operating inside of an echo chamber and most of them seem to kind of agree with your stance, you could very well think that the entire world agrees with your stance, or that there's that you're speaking for a very large group of people. We established in the first video that, in all honesty, the people that consume content of hobby content is actually a very tiny niche. So even if 99% of people agreed with anything on hobby content, which I summarily rejected in the first video, automatically we're in trouble, because that very well could represent less than 10% of the entire hobby. It could represent maybe 20% of the entire hobby if I'm being super generous. The point is that still leaves between 80, 90, 75%, whatever ratio you want. That leaves the majority of the hobby outside of this purview. So even if we have some kind of a consensus here, it's a consensus on a very small subset of the overall hobby pie. So bottom line is, I don't care what your feedback was. I don't disagree that you probably received feedback that kind of agreed with your stance. That doesn't mean it represents a large group of people. And to be honest, a lot of the feedback I got was people rejecting your entire premise out of hand with varying degrees of politeness. Let's put it that way. So let me tell you, the feedback I got would disagree with you in a lot of aspects, in a lot of ways, and found the whole kind of 180-degree turn. You can't say there's clown content and then say like, oh, well, there's good and bad content. And I wouldn't say what kind of content people should be making. It's like, literally, that's what the whole thing started off about. Anyway, moving on, please moving on.
Let me follow that up with this. This all kind of seems like a natural conclusion question, not conclusion over, but like, it seems like a natural, like, hey, how come this? You all have a mega platform, Card Ladder, bought by PS. Forgive me if I'm getting the terminology exactly wrong, but purchased by PSA. Why aren't you making this? You said you don't like half the content you're making. So why aren't you making this content? Or why aren't you focusing on, building this brand and this education, I guess we'll call it, and putting it out there for everybody?
Maybe one day we will. Right now, our role is data. Between Kristina and myself, we manage a 25,000 verified card database, and then we also manage a sales history tool that has over 30 million sales and represents somewhere between probably 3 and 4 million sports cards. And that's a 24/7 job. We don't take days off. This past weekend during Passover and during Easter, we were working still on those days as well. We work on all holidays. We don't, even when we're going to be taking a vacation in a few days here, we will still be working every day during that vacation. We worked every day when we were at the Mint Collective. Our job, first and foremost, is providing the hobby with a scholarly caliber set of data, which is an important part of the content creator equation, is that there's a data tool out there that vets sales, that takes data collection with the utmost level of seriousness, and that gives it 24/7 attention.
So I'm going to stop right there. Beautiful humble brag, well done. # humble brag. But here's the thing. I know this is not true. And this isn't to be mean. It's like, just summarily, it's not true. And the reason I say it's not true is because you have enough time to opine on the state of content on YouTube. You're spending 24/7 working on this tool and the data and training people and doing all this thing related to Card Ladder. Here's the thing. I believe sincerely that they put a ton of time and a ton of energy and a ton of effort into building up Card Ladder to where it is today. And they've done a lot of long days and long evenings. I have no doubt about any of that. I have no doubt they probably were working themselves into the ground, because their whole original model about the vetting the data is not really a scalable thing. It's basically just interjecting more and more and more hours, more man hours of effort and labor. So it was never a scalable thing the way it was. It wasn't really an automated system. It required a lot of manual labor, a lot of manual review. And even if you were able to automate some elements of it, it takes up an inordinate amount of time. So all those things I can agree on and believe that they are 100% true. But we had enough time to opine on content. So then I've got two choices. Either you don't watch enough content to be able to really opine on it in a educated manner, which we already established, since apparently you didn't think that any content existed before 2016. So I question then your ability to properly critique and assess the current content landscape, although Card Ladder does have a feed on it that does contain a certain amount of content. So you have all these strong opinions on content, but you don't have enough time theoretically to watch a lot of content. And at the same time, you haven't seen enough content potentially. Again, I'm taking you at face value here. You haven't seen enough potentially to even know how much is out there in the first place. So I'm back to my original idea. So then why, out of the little bit of time that we have available, are we then wasting it trying to fix a problem that you haven't fully established as a problem? And maybe you're not even the one to diagnose the problem. So this all started because you decided to interject yourself into a space where apparently you shouldn't have enough time to know that much about. Your participation in the card hobby as a whole, and even as a content creator, still puts you in kind of this little silo, because again, content takes a lot of time. I know, as somebody who covers and talks about news and discusses all these different things, I have very, very long watch lists oftentimes where I'm watching all these things just to keep general tabs. I can't watch all of it, and I devote time specifically to that, let alone if I was doing something as time intensive as the labor they do. So you can't then talk about how you don't have time, and then clearly you have time. Do you see the contradiction? Just throwing that out there.
And we do that. And in addition to our research responsibilities and obligations, we also run it as a business. So we're running a business, and we're working on data 24/7. And then when we decide to take a break on Friday nights for a few hours,
then you argue about content in a manner that you're not completely versed in. Thank you. Good to know. All right, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in this conversation.
Now, Chris said this, Josh said this verbatim. Chris, you agreed on the one. It threw me for a loop. It was on the 17th, I think, but the wrong date was at the top. You addressed that in the chat. And Chris, look, Josh said this. It was hilarious. He said, I don't give a flying effing shit how many followers I have. And he continues, I think that frees up your mind. And he finishes adding, this allows you to make better content. And a lot of the focus there, that conversation, like in the meat of it, I think that summed it up very well. But it's like, people shouldn't care about how many people are watching them. They should just care about making like that consistent, good content. But, at the end of the day, people on YouTube are influencers. One way or the other, you're an influencer. If an influencer has zero reach, if they have zero appeal to people out there, can they really make a difference? And then if they're not making a difference, are they doing anything for the betterment of the hobby, or are they just making content on the side for their own jollies?
Go ahead, Kristina.
Yes and no. I mean, I think that by creating authentic content that you don't care if someone or the masses are listening to, you're going to have appeal to those masses. By being true to yourself as a collector, flipper, dealer, investor, however you want to call yourself, in whatever order, people will start following you because they'll be like, wow, this is someone who's just being himself or herself. This is someone who like is speaking to me, even if I don't agree with them on everything. Like they're speaking to me as if they're speaking to themselves, and maybe they are. And I think with that, if you're authentic, people will start following you and people will start watching your stuff. Look, like some of the biggest influencers in the world are like the makeup artist girls that like sit and put makeup on their face and teach you how to do it. They like makeup. Like that's literally authentically what they enjoy doing. And they like teaching others how to use the products that they enjoy and how to like do whatever. Okay.
So we just need to be more like the makeup content creators.
Yeah, just be more like makeup girls. That's what I'm saying. No. But you just this whole like inauthenticity that we're seeing breed throughout this hobby is what's getting me. Like, and I mean I could harp on it all night if you want, but like it really comes down to like, are you here for the sports cards? If you're not, then I don't want to hear from you. Like I just don't care.
So I did enjoy the Christina's foray into the makeup girls. One quick side point though, there is content like that. That isn't the only genre that it falls under. There can be content where people are watching other people do various things, variety of different things, but it goes back to why they're watching. It might be watching because maybe they are trying to learn something. It can also be watching because maybe they find that relaxing. And for some folks, just having something on in the background is like a source of comfort. I'm not going to get into this whole psychology of why people watch different kinds of content, although that would be some proper hashtag scholarship is all I'm trying to say. But the psychology of it is a part of this too. It isn't always about authenticity, although that is a factor. That is a thing. People do appreciate when they feel like they're being talked to by somebody that isn't putting on a character or putting on an air. But some of the most successful people on YouTube are genuinely putting on a character. Like their whole shtick is a character. I've cited before the whole Dr. Disrespect thing. I hope you don't actually think the guy is like that all the time in his day-to-day life, because that'd be very annoying and he would get punched in the face all the time. But within the context of his game streaming, that larger than life, ridiculous over the top personality is part of the appeal of that whole Dr. Disrespect thing. Gaming streamers utilize that all the time. But on YouTube, people have that all the time. PewDiePie was, part of being ridiculous, was part of his whole shtick, doing all that stuff. Again, I'm using the gaming example, but that's an example of that is a personality driven type of content. Well, bring it into the sports card space. What Kristina said isn't inherently wrong, but it goes back to the idea. It's still a misunderstanding of why people are watching. And you might be fixating and focusing on why do your friends and why do the people watch? Well, it might be because they're seeking out this level of authenticity. Some of the most authentic people, though, that I know of in this space make videos. They're very passionate about it. They are authentically themselves, but they struggle with delivery. They struggle to explain things. Sometimes they do ramble. They go on and on and on. And it's not that they're not being authentic. It's that they're stumbling over their words because they want to get out what they have to say. And that isn't their strength of communication. But some of their friends and folks that do enjoy it do still get some appreciation, especially if even in the course of trying to communicate and struggling in whatever way they're struggling, they're still trying, and they also do have some knowledge to share. They have some information. Maybe they do have a good sense of humor, and it offers some kind of entertainment. I can't tell you why they watch, but at the same time, that answer is going to vary by person. So the whole authenticity thing is really kind of a weird direction to take. I understand the idea behind it, but sometimes people just want to be entertained. So they're less worried about the authenticity of it rather than, am I being entertained? And if the answer is yes, then I'm getting what I want out of this. The last piece of it is also delving into the whole hobby purity test, which is always a thing that I reject. Just out of hand summarily. I'm never a big fan of you saying like, well, you're not, if you're not being, true enough, or you're not meeting this criteria or that criteria, you don't belong, or you shouldn't be doing this. It's not your place to say. It's your place to not watch it if you don't like it. That is as far as it goes. So we'll continue forward, and we'll see what other pieces we want to touch on here.
True to yourself and your journey in the hobby, then people will like oh my god, like the stupid movie, but not a stupid movie, Field of Dreams. Like if you build it, they will come. Like if you're authentic, they will follow.
Great movie reference, but sometimes you build it and the stands are still empty. Just saying. Like it's not a guarantee if you build it or come. And all the authenticity in the world is not gonna make up for lack of knowledge. It's not gonna make up for lack of delivery. It's not gonna make up for if you can't connect or relate to any audience. That's not gonna work. It's again, it's too complicated to try to distill it down to if you build it, they will come. Because we can argue that some of the people you're criticizing and critiquing built it and people came. You don't like it, but they did. And Dakota's going to get into some of that. So I just wanted to quickly make that point.
In the last 20 minutes, these have been not so veiled shots at I would say Jeff, and chat seems to agree, Jeff Wilson. And I would just ask this. I've watched Jeff's content for, I don't know, a year and a half now. Chris, similar to your story, like I've been in the community for 20 years. I didn't know card content created outside of Beckett until about 2020, right? So I was new to this whole thing. And when I watch Jeff, I'm like, okay, this guy, like, he doesn't know everything about cards. This guy's clearly new to cards. You know, he's learning this as he goes. And, but that said, he is a professional guy here. And, he's talking about markets and, it seems very Michael Saylor-ly. I don't know how I'm supposed to end that. So, I mean, but do you think it's bad that a guy like Jeff Wilson is the top of the content creator world, right? He is. I mean, 150,000, 140,000 subscribers, something like that. Do you think it should be more into someone who like, I just throw a name out there that has a lot of followers, baseball card investor, collector, dealer, because we know like that guy knows everything about cards. He's probably touched more cards than anyone else in the world, right? Do you think that's a better fit for the top of the hobby pyramid?
Well, if Josh was here, you might get a very different answer. But Josh is not here, sadly. And look, I think there's a place for everybody. And I think that there's a place for all different types of content. And there's a role for anybody who wants to have a role. There is a role for it.
Now there's a role for everybody. Then what are we doing here? This whole thing is ridiculous. Look, I like that he threw this in here at this point because honestly I'm running out of gas at this late hour. So I'm trying to get through this. So I'm going to keep this interruption fairly short. That is the most ridiculous statement of this entire thing. If it's true, and I agree that there is room for all kinds of things in the hobby, but if that's the case, then none of this would have ever been a conversation in the first place. You let people be. Yes, I agree. Then we didn't need your series of posts and opinions on not enough scholarly content, and we need more of this. We need more. Great. Either make it or fund somebody to do it. Well, kind of what I talked about in the first video. Otherwise, just deal with it. Go back to working on business. Like you got other things to do. Clearly, 24/7, guys. 24/7. Anyway, fine. Continue, please continue.
Not interested in sniping at any particular content creator. I'm just not. I just don't think that that's the productive path. I think the productive path is putting forth certain principles or a certain philosophy or a certain outlook that is going to achieve the specific goal that I've laid out. And so just to recap that very briefly, the goal that I've laid out is making content that appeals to more conservative-minded, more sober-minded, more rational-minded people who need content of, to put it bluntly, a certain IQ level. And it's not.
I forgot about this one. I remember reading the replay of the chat. IQ level. That's gonna get the people on your side. Chris, there's a time and a place. Oh man. At least in my live stream, when I call people peasants, I do it with a smile on my face. You can't be measuring it on forget it. If you can't figure out why the IQ comment was like a no-go non-starter, you're beyond my help. Please, moving on, please continue whatever your nonsense.
Existing at the top right now, and that's not only any one content creator's responsibility. And maybe that content creator or any of these content creators have the capacity to make that content. Maybe they do know how to perform research at a higher level. Maybe they do know how to read charts. Maybe they do know how to perform analyses that interweave sports outcomes and sports history with collectibles markets. Maybe they do know how to do that. But the one thing I'm certain of is that they're not doing it right now. And you laid out some good reasons for why maybe they're not. Maybe the thing that incentivizes them is seeing their follower count and their view count and their subscriber count go up. And so maybe the incentives are pointing them in that direction.
They certainly are. I mean, that's what the incentives are. Yeah.
Just consider me the incentive to, hey, if you want to, if there's somebody out here who's speaking, and which is me, and saying we want content for people like us. Look, when I consume basketball related content.
All right, I don't care about basketball, so I'm gonna skip past this part. But I just want to say, consider me the incentive. It's like, are you bringing a bag of cash? Because otherwise, like, guys, a lot of us make this content for various reasons. We've all got our own reasons. It's not, none of it is because of money. Let's be clear about that. Because in this genre, in this niche, you're not going to make a lot of money, even if you get a relatively decent amount of views. Because again, in this category, views are fairly small. That's just reality. It's not me being mean. It's not me trying to downplay what we do here. It's a niche. It's a small, category. Again, the fact that Sports Card Investor is one of the biggest in the space and he's at 150,000 subscribers, that's small in the context of YouTube. The idea that, for some reason there's this great incentive that, well, there are these people out there that want this stuff. Oh, well, great. I can put time, research, effort to do all this additional analysis so that I can make a video that will be seen by 7 people. And maybe Michael Saylor on a good day if he's not busy doing something more important. That's not a very good incentive. Unless you're literally being subsidized, at which point, well then, by all means, if Fanatics wants to get a high concept series on nothing but data analysis that'll be watched by 10 people, but they want to pay for it, we'll make it. But otherwise, why on earth? The reason it's not being made is because most people don't find it to be a good use of their time to make these really deep and detailed videos with all this information supposedly put in that no one is watching. It's very discouraging to feel like you're putting in all this time and effort and work and no one watches. And for most content creators, that is a long time. That you're going to spend a long time where you're making these videos and no one is seeing it. No one is reacting. You're not getting any kind of feedback. There's just nothing there. But even when you eventually you reach a point where you do, it's still, it is a sense of satisfaction, but it's not going to be lucrative. It's still not going to compensate you for your time. And I made the joke before a bunch of times. When the channel does well, I basically pay my StreamYard subscription and maybe a couple of small things here and there. And that's about as far as it goes. I make more money basically on some months than basically before lunchtime on the first day of the month. This is not a lucrative thing. Some people have some sponsorships and some things, so that obviously subsidizes it and adds some additional value to the content they're making, the channel they're producing. But at the same time, the incentives aren't there unless you really have a passion for it and want to do it. And CNT Collectibles there in the comment that is displaying there, yeah, reading charts and high-level analysis doesn't get your eyeballs, but he puts in a lot of effort. He's got his chart blast. I'm familiar with it, so you can check out that channel if you want to. But yeah, if you're interested in that kind of thing, it does exist. It is niche. It requires a specific audience that is interested in seeing it. Doesn't mean I'm discouraging anybody from making it. It's the exact opposite. I'm encouraging you to make the content you want to make if you want to make it. But Chris was trying to discourage people, and now he's trying to create this weird incentive that isn't an incentive because it's like, okay, well, Chris will watch your stuff. That's cool, man. So what? No disrespect, but like, so what? Anyway, moving on.
Chris, you talked about having one really nice subscriber, one viewer versus 1,000. You said 500 bots and 500 lowbrows. I think you might want to expand on that a little bit because look, I know my audience and guys, I love y'all, but you're lowbrow and all 4,000 plus of you. That's just what we are. We're out here in the gutter, man. So I mean, talk about that a little bit more, right? Because it does seem chats, they're on. It sounds elitist. It sounds elitist to say I want one Michael Saylor versus 200 people who are in the hobby right now or whatever. I guess yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's a totally fair criticism, and I think that you're never going to please everybody. I think we have, to your audience's credit, I think we have plenty of content that they like, and they're here on your channel, and they're having a good time tonight, expressing their own opinions and expressing their own points of view. I'm trying to communicate that there's a space that's missing, and whatever the phrase is for it, I personally don't think it's elitist. I think it's elitism has different connotations in different contexts.
Yes, elitism does have different connotations, but that's evading the issue. And you specifically initiated this entire conversation not because you were asking for different kind of content. You were criticizing and trying to downplay and trying to discourage people from watching the other content you didn't like, which you are completely avoiding in this entire segment of this piece. Just saying. So yes, it does come off as elitist. Did we cover the piece where you said it needed to be high IQ a little earlier? Just, they might be getting this impression from something you're saying. It might have been something you said, literally something you said.
I think the way that I would describe what I'm looking for is like sort of vanilla content that's sort of bland and that's really oriented around nerdy topics, quite frankly. Putting things into a context that is going to be intellectually challenging for people who are seeking out that sort of thing. Look, I don't expect everybody to want that content. I think the metrics would probably indicate that that's never going to be the content that's going to get the most views or the most followers. But I think that's not the right framing of the discussion that we're having. In other words, if the unstated premise is that the hobby is doing the best when its videos are getting the maximum amount of views, I think that's incorrect. And I think there are plenty of industries that are doing much better than the hobby that don't have content that gets many views at all. I don't think that there's even remotely a positive correlation between the well-being of our industry and how many followers, subscribers, or views our content is getting. So I just want to like draw that distinction clearly. I'm not advocating for content that will get 10 bazillion views. I'm not even remotely interested in that. I'm advocating for content that's going to convince the Michael Saylors of the world or the me's of the world that this is a really interesting space and that there's an intellectual challenge here.
So I think the premise here is fine from the perspective that he doesn't believe that there is a connection between the amount of views and the strength or the health of the industry. The problem is that he, in the course of this entire discussion, at any point, he has never successfully made any point that the content is really that impactful. We could have a situation where the content could be good and the industry could be good, or the content can be bad and the industry could be bad, but the two might not directly relate to each other, or the relationship might be a little bit weaker. It could be a situation where the content is good and the industry still does poorly, not because of a lack of quality or because of a lack of availability, just rather the industry itself isn't appealing at that moment in time. So for the niche audience, again, I keep emphasizing the audience for this content is fairly niche. For the niche audience, it could still be engaging, it could still be good, but at the same time, the industry itself could be hurting, or the industry could be absolutely doing gangbusters and the content could be about average. So it's one of those things where we never established this correlation. He talks about, he's basically given us his opinion that he feels that the content is not, helping the industry per se. And then in some cases, he's arguing that it's hurting, kind of leading to what we talked about in the first video, but he never successfully establishes that. And it's one of those things where like, okay, that's your opinion, but I'm not really buying what you're selling on this one.
We talked about, you want to create, you want to see better content from, investment and collecting perspective. What has Card Ladder done to either promote that idea, or what is there something Card Ladder's done that maybe that hasn't promoted that you wish, you'd like to see a change at Card Ladder with how it's ran? No, I shouldn't say how it's ran, but some features or things like that.
Card Ladder is content, and it is a particular type of content. It's data. It's very it's very much data. It's numbers. And I think numbers are fascinating. I think numbers and historical data tell some of the most compelling stories that we can possibly tell as humans. But I don't think that it's Card Ladder's place as a data operation, as a sort of price guide, as a sort of hobby app, a hobby experience enhancing application. I don't think that there's a space for it to try and overstep its bounds. I think it serves the purpose that it serves, and it fulfills what it tries to fulfill, providing a level of excellence with respect to data, a standard of excellence that somebody ought to step up and fulfill. So I don't know, that might be an unsatisfying answer to your question.
It is a highly unsatisfactory answer to that question. Also, I should point out, so then if Card Ladder is is content, the data and what it provides, and it can provide these stories. So in effect, they are content creators inside of their 24/7 operation. But at the same time, so they are providing that data. That content. I keep interchanging them. But they're providing the content. So this is what happens when the Cobra runs out. The content they're providing. And apparently that content isn't good enough for Michael Saylor. Why can't we just get Michael Saylor a Card Ladder account then? That would resolve it. Like, I'm being facetious here, but like I'm honestly trying to get around. Like I said, I don't have quite the energy that I did in the first half video where we did the really long video. This one's not going to be short, but it's not going to be nearly that bad. And we're approaching the end here, so we'll almost be wrapping up here with final thoughts. But the bottom line that I'm coming to with a lot of this is that Chris's thoughts and opinions are disjointed. They are strictly opinions, but some of them really aren't backed by much other than like hunches and, I talked to some guys, I talked to some people. I already made fun of that in the first one, so I'm not even gonna go back on the same ground I did already. It's just, it's not really doing a very good job presenting this case. And in the course of doing so, the longer he spoke, the worse he made it as far as not winning over the crowd. And Chris would argue that I would think, based on the angle he decided to take on this, he would argue that he's not trying to win over the crowd. Well, you didn't do that. And he's trying to advocate for these things that are available for a niche audience. So basically, the entire thing is he doesn't want to discourage people from making other kinds of content, even though he basically did that in his initial utterances. But at the same time, he wants to encourage this super niche content that almost no one's going to watch, that may or may not ever lead to anything under certain circumstances, even though Card Letter itself is the kind of content he's trying to say that has that kind of data and that kind of information that could tell you about if the market's doing good or bad, that theoretically should be enough for a Michael Saylor. But I guess somebody has to write a term paper on it. Maybe we need Josh Luber to fire up his word processor one more time and use some Card Ladder data to hand it off to Michael Saylor. But outside of that, I'm not seeing where any of the discussions that he's tried to interject into it lead us anywhere from where we were. It's partially backtracking. It's an active decision never to just name the content creators he was citing as the examples of the concerns he had about content, even though we're all pretty convinced it's Jeff Wilson and Sports Card Investor, but we're never going to say it. We're never going to name it because then that would be too easy. And if we did that, then it would become a referendum, bringing that one back, referendum on the content itself. And some people would like it and some people wouldn't. And that would make it problematic. Just trying to make it this broad and general tries to make it into this bigger issue when it's really not. It's actually a very simplistic issue. It's one man's opinion, backed by hunches and borderline information and these, quasi-analytical, conventions that he's trying to throw in here, but at the same time, never hitting on anything, never attaching itself to anything solid. Again, at the very baseline of all of this, you need to at least provide something to indicate what connection you feel there is between good content, quote unquote, and the industry. And since I don't think the connection is very strong, it doesn't really matter how good or bad the content is. Of course, we'd all aspire to have better content, but that's on the individual. Again, given that there aren't real incentives. Chris's badge of approval, virtual badge of approval, is not going to cut it as far as an incentive to produce this kind of niche content that he seeks out. But I'll leave it at that, and then we'll get to final thoughts.
All right, let's talk about this decline of the hobby, and then we'll call this a wrap. You talked about the decline of the hobby, and you were saying that there's not enough, stickiness in the content world, or people are kind of leaving. But I mean, could we also argue that people aren't leaving? They're just, in fact, like you said, they're just spending less as they're getting smarter in this hobby, and that the focus of the hobby should actually just be on growth of people. And I think, well, I don't want to get too far deep into it with Fanatics, but I think they're going to focus on that. Can we say that?
Yeah, I do think Fanatics is going to focus on that, but it's not going to be easy. I don't think it's going to be as simple as let's run a bunch of advertisements and then suddenly the collector base explodes. I think that marketing is going to have to be very well done. And I have a few ideas myself, but those are my ideas that I'm keeping, and maybe one day I'll share them with the right people at the right time.
Now you're keeping ideas to yourself? I would have suggested you may have wanted to keep your content ideas to yourself a little while ago, and we would have saved this entire exercise. But I'm not complaining. The content gods have been kind to me. But I'm just throwing out there the irony of this statement, given this entire direction that we have gone. Moving on.
Always trying to find ways to make it better. Hence the camera, the microphone, the lights, all this crap, right? That said, it does take all kinds. And I do think that sometimes people just want to plop down on a couch and watch, some cornballs do some cheesy crap. I don't know.
Of course. I used to work in the music business before this, and one of the artists that I worked with the most was a rapper named Bone Crusher from Atlanta. And he told me something that he told me this 15 years ago. I still remember it to this day. He said, look, a lot of people might think I'm corny or my music is corny, but for every one cool or nerdy guy out there, there's, 10,000 corny guys. And his point was, look, I'm in the business of selling records, and maybe this doesn't appeal to a handful of people. You're never going to please everybody, but this certainly appeals to the masses, and I'm not apologizing for it. That was his point of view, and all due respect to him for that point of view. That's a completely fine point of view. But Dakota, I think you do an excellent job, and I think that let us never confuse follower counts, subscriber counts, and view counts as being metrics that indicate quality or success, because they're neither.
So I played out the rest of it, and a lot of it was just kind of talking through. I did play one more little clip there at the end, where was the Chris giving that analogy with that rapper. I found that to be very ironic. A beautiful, little bookend on the entire thing, where it's there is a place for content that is designed for the masses, content that is digestible. It's a topic we've talked about a lot on the live stream, because the fact of the matter is that a lot of the stuff that gets the most views and those things tends to be more digestible stuff. More complicated stuff that's tougher to swallow is going to be more difficult for most people to do, to watch and to really absorb and get much out of. But it's not. But this again, it was the approach I think that Chris took in a lot of this that really created a lot of the problems for him. It's not an IQ thing. It's a time and attention thing. People don't necessarily want to be lectured to. It's a situation where, again, the presentation is going to be everything. You can explain something in a way that's accessible. And if you fail to do that and you come off like you're basically talking down to the audience, that is going to turn off a segment of the audience. You're not going to get the kind of information that you want or the kind of feedback that you would want. And it's going to hinder your ability to get your information or your message out to more people. And that really is, I think, the biggest takeaway, so because I'm going to conclude in a simple manner on this one, the biggest takeaway of this entire thing is that this live stream in theory could have been a great opportunity to present a case. I do genuinely believe that there was a target intended with the original social media posts, and this was a very elaborate attempt to diffuse that and try to get away from it and never really acknowledge it in that way, because a lot of the shots taken were very pointed. And it's not like it's the first time that the card ladder team has taken shots at the market movers or Jeff Wilson or whatever. They're competitors in the space. That's a fact of the matter. Those of us who observe, our industry observers, are watching that segment. It's like, yeah, we know you guys are kind of having your little war going on, your little turf war, and that's fine. But at the same time, you have to kind of approach it in a more mature manner, because the reality is, while you may have a turf war going on, the card ladder is now part of a greater collector's company. And as a result, that collector's company, in many ways, does business with the market movers folks indirectly, because they accept group submissions and they do business that way. And if they have any involvement in the hobby in any way, shape, or form at industry summits and things, those same people are going to be in the room. It's one of those things where you can dislike people that you're having to technically do business with. Doesn't change the fact that you have to pick your spots and be very polite when you have to be polite. And taking, poorly veiled shots across the bow is probably not the approach you want to be taking, especially if you're inside of the industry. If you're outside of the industry and you have no stake in it, then you can do whatever you want, basically. You're really a free agent and you can just tackle it however you wish. But if you're inside of that particular space, one of the points that I've made, you're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong business right now to be trying to take those kinds of shots. And I don't think Chris at any point was able to successfully talk himself out of this. I think a lot of the points he made, again, were really debatable at best. Like, if I want to be extremely generous, they were debatable. And I think a lot of it was just putting opinion as fact and citing, again, even in the latter portion, even though we didn't cite studies, we didn't go back to studies, thankfully. We cited feedback that he received. And I'm like, okay, when, where, who, how many people? Because that doesn't tell me anything. That good. You talk to some people and they seem to agree with your general premise. That's awesome. What does that mean, and why do I care? And those questions are never fully answered or fleshed out. Anyway, full credit again to Dakota, Sports Card Anonymous, for doing the live stream. I think he was able to ask some good questions. All things considered, considering the amount of things that were thrown back at him, I think he did a good job responding. So kudos to him for that. And at the end of the day, like I said, for me, it's not a personal thing with this, because for some people it seems to be a personal thing. It's very, very funny, very amusing. It's not a personal thing for me, because I'm mostly interested just from the perspective of, I listened to it and I heard a lot of things that were being done in kind of a lazy intellectual way. So if we're going to do the hashtag scholarship thing, let's do better. And let's actually make sure that if we're going to make points, let's really make points. Let's make points and then really talk through where we're drawing that information from, or inferences, or if it's just an opinion, just call it an opinion. In my opinion, this, and this. And that's really what it is. And I do think though that the very idea, the gatekeeping idea, was always going to be a non-starter. And for a lot of folks, it was going to rub them the wrong way. And I don't think this live stream did much to dissuade many people. I think you won more people who are going to now look at you in a weary way the next time you utter one of these positions. And I'll be curious to see if they decide to continue down this rabbit hole that they created for themselves, or if they kind of sit back and just let the dust clear, let the dust settle for a little while. Anyway, so that's it for now. More videos coming up on the channel. Live streams on Fridays, 9 p.m. Eastern time, where we'll talk about anything going on in the hobby or anything else that people want to chat about. So this concludes this reaction to this live stream. This is the part 2 that I threatened, and some people seem to really want. So here you go. Hopefully you got something out of it. I wasn't able to give you the hashtag scholarship and a lot of the other stuff that I was able to give you in the first one, because I'm mostly out of gas on this one, and the second half of it covered a lot of the same ground as the first. Anyway, so that's it for now. Thanks very much. We'll catch you in the next one.